the depths of night, when sleep eludes us and the mind wanders through corridors of memory and possibility, we sometimes feel the weight of invisible threads. Choices made years ago ripple forward into this moment. Words spoken in anger echo through relationships. Patterns repeat with uncanny precision, as if some unseen hand guides our steps along predetermined paths. Are we bound to a script already written in the stars? Or are we the ones weaving the loom of our existence? This question has haunted humanity since we first gazed upward and wondered whether the constellations spelled out our destiny. The ancients spoke of fate in many tongues, as the inexorable spinning of cosmic thread, as the accumulated weight of past actions, as the judgment pronounced by gods who see all endings from the beginning. Yet within the Hermetic tradition, we encounter a perspective both more subtle and more empowering. The Hermetic sages understood that the universe operates according to immutable laws, but they also recognized something that pure fatalists missed. Within the architecture of cosmic necessity lies a hidden chamber where human will can operate. The key to this chamber is understanding the difference between blind submission to fate and conscious participation in the great work of causality. Tonight, we journey into this mystery. We will walk with the thread cutters of ancient Greece, sit beside the karmic judges of India, and listen to the whispered prophecies of Norse seers. But our destination lies deeper than mythology, in the heart of Hermetic wisdom, where fate and freedom reveal themselves not as enemies, but as dance partners in the cosmic ballet. To understand how the Hermetic tradition transforms our relationship with destiny, we must first hear how other voices of antiquity spoke of fate's dominion. For across the ancient world, 3 great civilizations developed profound yet distinctly different understandings of how necessity shapes human life. In the shadowed halls of Greek imagination lived the Moirai, 3 sisters whose work never ceased. Clotho spun the thread of life from her distaff, drawing forth the silver strand of each soul's journey. Lachesis measured the length and texture of each thread, determining the span and character of mortal days. And Atropos, whose name means she who cannot be turned, cut the thread with shears no prayer could stay. Here, fate appeared as weaving, a cosmic textile being created moment by moment. The metaphor carried profound implications. Unlike a written scroll, which exists complete before it is read, a weaving emerges through process. Each thread must be laid in its proper sequence, each color contributing to a pattern that emerges as the work progresses. The Greeks intuited something crucial. Fate might be inevitable, but it is not static. It unfolds through time, shaped by the interplay of individual threads within a larger design. Yet the Greek vision contained within it a troubling fatalism. The Moirai operated beyond human influence, their cosmic loom accepting no interference from mortal hands. Heroes might rage against their predicted doom. Oracles might warn of coming tragedy, but the pattern would complete itself regardless. This was fate as external force, magnificent, terrible, and utterly indifferent to human desire. In the philosophical schools of India, however, ancient sages articulated a different understanding. Here, fate appeared not as the work of distant goddesses, but as the inexorable mathematics of moral causation. Karma, literally action, described a universe where every deed, every word, every thought set ripples in motion that would eventually return to their source. But here, the Hermetic journey takes a decisive turn from both Greek fatalism and Indian moral determinism. The karmic vision possessed a compelling logic. If I plant seeds of kindness, kindness will eventually flower in my life. If I sow cruelty, I will reap suffering in return. This was not punishment imposed by judging deities, but simply the natural consequence of actions rippling through the interconnected web of existence. Unlike the Greek Moirai, karma offered a participatory element. We ourselves create the causes that shape our future experience. Yet even this more empowering vision carried shadows of predestination. If every moment of present experience represents the inevitable fruition of past actions, and if every present action plants seeds that will shape future moments, where does genuine choice enter the equation? The wheel of samsara seemed as binding as the Greek loom. Even if we ourselves had helped weave our position upon it, far to the north, among the frost-touched forests and wind-swept shores of Scandinavia, yet another understanding emerged. The Norse spoke of Wyrd, often translated as fate, but carrying connotations that resist simple explanation. Wyrd was not the work of distant weavers or the mathematics of moral consequence, but something more intimate and immediate. The accumulated weight of all that has been, pressing itself into the shape of what must come to be. The Norse understanding possessed a temporal complexity that both Greek and Indian thought lacked. Wyrd was simultaneously past, present, and future, not a linear unfolding but a dynamic tension where what has already occurred continues to exert its influence. What is currently happening adds its weight to the pattern, and what is destined to occur already casts its shadow backward into present moment. This vision found its most profound expression in the image of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose roots stretched into multiple wells and whose branches supported all the realms of existence. At the base of the tree lived the Norns, past, present, and future, who watered its roots with the accumulated essence of all that had been, was, and would be. Here fate appeared neither as external imposition nor moral mathematics, but as the organic unfolding of reality's own deepest patterns. Yet even this more nuanced understanding left little room for genuine freedom. If the present moment represents the inevitable convergence of all that has come before, and if that convergence determines what must follow, then consciousness appears trapped within an iron lattice of necessity, able to witness but not truly alter the cosmic process. Into this landscape of ancient wisdom, profound but ultimately fatalistic, the Hermetic tradition introduced a perspective both more subtle and more liberating. The Hermetic sages understood that the universe indeed operates according to immutable laws, but they recognized something that escaped both Greek weavers and Indian karma counters and Norse Wyrd watchers. The difference between operating within law and being enslaved by law. Consider the musician seated at her instrument. The piano before her operates according to strict physical laws. Each key produces a specific pitch. Harmony emerges from mathematical relationships between frequencies. Rhythm unfolds through temporal patterns that cannot be violated. Yet within these constraints, infinite creativity becomes possible. The laws of music do not imprison the musician. They provide the very foundation that makes musical expression possible. The Hermetic understanding of fate operates according to similar principles. Yes, the cosmos unfolds according to laws that no mortal power can suspend or alter. Every cause produces its effect. Every action generates its consequence. Every choice sets forces in motion that will work themselves out according to universal principles. But, and here lies the crucial insight, consciousness itself is one of the forces operating within this cosmic system. This is not myth alone, it is initiation into a fundamentally different way of experiencing causality. The Emerald Tablet speaks of this mystery in its cryptic language. As above, so below, as below, so above. This is not merely a statement about correspondence between cosmic and terrestrial realms, but a recognition that consciousness participates in the same creative principles that govern the movement of planets and the growth of seeds. The human mind is not outside the cosmic order looking in, but within it, operating according to its laws, while simultaneously having the capacity to understand and work with those laws. Where Greek fatalism saw external compulsion and Indian karma saw moral mathematics, Hermetic wisdom perceived something more dynamic, a universe where law and consciousness interpenetrate so thoroughly that the very understanding of law becomes a form of liberation. The sage who grasps the principles of cosmic causation does not escape those principles, but learns to work with them so skillfully that what appears as limitation becomes the foundation for creative action. But if the cosmos is lawful, where does freedom hide? The answer lies in understanding the relationship between different levels of causation. At the grossest level, we are indeed subject to forces largely beyond our control. The circumstances of our birth, the genetic endowment we inherit, the cultural patterns we absorb, the historical moment into which we emerge. These represent what we might call the given elements of our existence, the raw material with which we must work. At a subtler level, however, we discover that consciousness possesses its own creative power. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every intention we form becomes itself a cause within the cosmic system. And because consciousness operates according to principles different from those governing physical matter, principles involving meaning, purpose, and understanding, it possesses a unique capacity to transform the very conditions within which it finds itself. The Hermetic tradition teaches that there are 7 universal laws, and understanding these laws is the key to moving from unconscious subjection to conscious participation. Among these, the law of cause and effect stands paramount. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This formulation contains within it both the recognition of cosmic determinism and the seed of human liberation. Nothing escapes the law, but there are many planes of causation. Physical events unfold according to physical laws. Emotional experiences follow emotional principles. Mental phenomena operate according to mental patterns. And spiritual realities govern themselves according to spiritual laws. The person who understands only physical causation remains trapped within physical determinism. But consciousness that learns to operate on multiple planes simultaneously discovers degrees of freedom unavailable to more limited awareness. What appears as binding chain from one perspective reveals itself as guiding pathway from another. This paradox lies at the heart of Hermetic understanding, and grasping it requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive the relationship between limitation and liberation. Consider the river flowing toward the sea. From one viewpoint, the river appears completely determined. The laws of gravity, the contours of the landscape, the patterns of erosion all combine to dictate precisely where the water will flow. Each drop follows a path that seems inevitable, carved by forces far greater than any individual particle of water. Yet from another perspective, the river is perfectly free. It expresses its essential nature through its movement. It carves its own channel through persistent action. It transforms the very landscape through which it flows. The Hermetic sage learns to perceive human destiny according to similar principles. Yes, we inherit certain patterns. We operate within certain constraints. We encounter certain necessities that no amount of wishing can alter. But these apparent limitations can become the very channels through which consciousness expresses its deepest nature and exercises its creative power. This understanding finds its most profound expression in the Hermetic conception of the Logos, the divine word or reason that maintains cosmic order. Unlike the distant, indifferent fate of Greek mythology, the Logos is not external to consciousness, but represents consciousness in its most universal aspect. To align with the Logos is not to submit to alien compulsion, but to participate in the cosmic intelligence of which our individual awareness forms a part. Yet even this alignment requires the intervention of nous, divine mind or intellect, which serves as the liberating principle within human consciousness. The Corpus Hermeticum describes nous as the gift that allows human beings to recognize their true nature and their proper relationship to the cosmic order. Through nous, we discover that we are not merely subjects of cosmic law, but potential participants in cosmic creativity. What must the soul release to ascend from the fatalistic to the participatory level of understanding? The answer involves releasing the illusion of separation, the belief that consciousness stands outside the cosmic process, either as its victim or as its potential conqueror. Both positions, fatalistic submission and rebellious assertion, rest on the same fundamental error: the assumption that the self and the cosmos represent two distinct orders of reality locked in struggle with each other. Hermetic wisdom reveals that consciousness and cosmos are aspects of a single reality. The laws that govern cosmic process are the same laws that govern conscious process when consciousness operates at its deepest level. The patterns that shape galactic evolution and stellar birth also shape the evolution of awareness and the birth of wisdom. To understand this is to discover that working with cosmic law is not limitation, but liberation into our fullest creative potential. This recognition transforms our relationship with the entire question of fate and freedom. Instead of asking whether we are free or determined, we begin asking, how can we align our individual creativity with cosmic creativity? Instead of trying to escape necessity, we inquire, how can we make necessity itself the vehicle for conscious expression? Every cause we set in motion through conscious choice becomes a thread in the tapestry of our becoming. But unlike the passive threads in the looms of the Moirai, these threads possess a peculiar property. They can transform themselves and influence the pattern of which they form a part. This is the essence of what the Hermetic tradition calls the alchemy of choice, the process by which conscious causation reshapes destiny itself. To understand this process, we must first recognize that not all choices operate at the same level. Most of our daily decisions, what to eat, where to walk, which words to speak in casual conversation, represent relatively surface-level choices that create minor ripples in the fabric of causation. These choices matter, and their accumulated effect can be significant, but they operate within patterns largely established by deeper forces. But certain choices penetrate to more fundamental levels of causation. These are the choices that involve our basic orientation toward existence, how we understand the nature of reality, what we consider most valuable, which aspects of our nature we choose to cultivate and which we choose to transform. Such choices operate according to what the Hermetic tradition calls higher laws, principles that govern subtler but more powerful levels of causation. The practice of inner transformation represents the most profound form of this alchemical process. When we undertake the conscious work of transforming our own nature, purifying destructive emotional patterns, clarifying confused mental habits, aligning our will with our deepest understanding, we are not merely changing ourselves, but participating in the creative transformation of the cosmos itself. To change our fate, we must change the hand that casts the thread. This statement contains multiple layers of meaning. At the most obvious level, it suggests that by altering our habitual patterns of choice, we can influence the future consequences that flow from our actions. If I have been unconsciously perpetuating cycles of anger or fear or self-limitation, becoming conscious of these patterns allows me to interrupt them and establish new causal chains leading toward different outcomes. But at a deeper level, the statement points towards something more mysterious: the possibility of transforming the very consciousness that makes choices. The hand that casts the thread is not just our decision-making faculty, but the entire complex of identity, understanding, and capacity from which our choices emerge. When this deeper level of transformation occurs, we discover that we are capable of choices that were literally impossible for us in our previous state. The Hermetic texts describe this process through the symbolism of death and rebirth. The old self, with its characteristic patterns of perception, desire, and action, must die in order for a new self to be born. But this is not death as termination, but death as transformation, similar to the way a caterpillar must dissolve its familiar form in order to emerge as a butterfly. During this process of inner transformation, our relationship with fate itself undergoes fundamental alteration. Patterns that previously seemed fixed and inevitable begin to reveal themselves as changeable. Limitations that appeared absolute prove to be relative to our level of understanding and capacity. What looked like binding chains gradually transform into pathways leading toward greater creativity and deeper fulfillment. Yet this transformation cannot be forced through willpower alone. The ego self that decides to undertake inner transformation is itself part of the pattern that needs to be transformed. Real change requires the intervention of something beyond ordinary self-conscious effort, what the Hermetic tradition calls the higher self, or the divine spark within human nature. This higher self operates according to principles that transcend ordinary causation while working through it. When we learn to align our conscious efforts with this deeper intelligence, we discover that we can participate in what appears miraculous: the transformation of seemingly fixed patterns through the creative application of higher law. The process resembles learning to work with rather than against the grain of wood. The woodcarver who tries to impose arbitrary shapes on resistant material will create only crude and unstable forms. But the artisan who learns to perceive and work with the natural patterns within the wood can create objects of lasting beauty that seem to express the essential nature of the material itself. As our understanding deepens, we begin to perceive that true freedom is not the escape from cosmic law, but harmony with it at increasingly subtle levels. This represents one of the most profound paradoxes in spiritual philosophy, and resolving it requires a fundamental shift in how we understand both freedom and necessity. The common understanding of freedom assumes that genuine choice requires the absence of determining factors. From this perspective, we are free only to the extent that our actions flow from pure spontaneity, unconditioned by prior causes or external constraints. But this conception of freedom, when examined closely, proves both impossible to achieve and undesirable to experience. Complete freedom from causation would mean that our choices had no relationship to our character, our understanding, our values, or our circumstances. Such choices would be entirely random rather than truly free. They would express nothing about who we are or what we care about, and they would create no meaningful consequences in our lives or in the world. The Hermetic understanding recognizes that genuine freedom emerges not from the absence of determining factors, but from conscious participation in the highest forms of determination. When our choices flow from deep understanding of cosmic law, from alignment with our truest nature, and from harmony with the creative principles that govern reality itself, we experience the most profound form of liberation possible. This insight echoes through multiple wisdom traditions. The Neoplatonists spoke of freedom as the soul's capacity to align itself with the good, not arbitrary choice between random alternatives, but the intelligent recognition and embrace of what is most truly desirable. The Gnostics understood liberation as gnosis, not escape from the cosmic order, but awakening to our true position within it. In each case, freedom appears not as independence from law, but as conscious cooperation with the highest laws accessible to human understanding. The musician achieves freedom not by ignoring the laws of harmony and rhythm, but by mastering them so thoroughly that they become vehicles for creative expression. The athlete experiences liberation not by rejecting the constraints of physics and physiology, but by working with them so skillfully that extraordinary performance becomes possible. But here, the Hermetic journey takes its most crucial turn toward practical application. Understanding the principle of freedom within necessity intellectually is one thing. Learning to live from this understanding is quite another. The process requires what we might call a philosophical reorientation, a fundamental shift in how we approach the challenges and opportunities of daily existence. Instead of experiencing obstacles as evidence of cosmic hostility or personal inadequacy, we begin to perceive them as information about which aspects of cosmic law we have not yet learned to work with skillfully. Instead of viewing our limitations as permanent features of an unchangeable fate, we recognize them as current boundaries that may expand as our understanding and capacity develop. This reorientation does not eliminate difficulty or struggle from human life, but it transforms the meaning and purpose of difficulty. Challenges become opportunities to deepen our understanding of cosmic law and to develop greater skill in working with its principles. Setbacks become sources of information about patterns that need to be recognized and transformed, rather than evidence that our situation is hopeless. Perhaps most importantly, this perspective allows us to embrace what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate, without falling into passive resignation. We can accept what cannot be changed while actively working to understand and transform what can be altered. We can acknowledge the reality of cosmic necessity while exercising our capacity to participate creatively in how that necessity expresses itself through our particular circumstances. Life often feels pre-written because we experience the present moment as the convergence of countless causes set in motion long before we became conscious of them. The family we were born into, the historical period we inhabit, the genetic endowment we carry, the cultural patterns we absorbed before we could choose. All of these contribute to shaping the terrain within which our current choices operate. Yet Hermetic wisdom reveals that this feeling of predestination, while containing genuine truth, represents only half the story. Yes, the present moment emerges from the accumulated weight of the past, but consciousness itself represents a creative force within the cosmic system, capable of introducing genuinely new elements into the causal matrix. Every moment of authentic awareness, every act of genuine understanding, every choice that flows from our deepest wisdom rather than our habitual patterns introduces something unprecedented into the stream of causation. These creative contributions may seem small in comparison with the vast forces that shape historical events and natural processes, but they possess a unique quality. They carry within themselves the seed of further creativity. A single moment of true compassion can interrupt cycles of hatred that have persisted for generations. One flash of genuine insight can illuminate patterns that have remained unconscious for decades. A single choice made from wisdom, rather than habit, can redirect the entire trajectory of a life toward greater fulfillment and more beneficial influence. This is why the Hermetic tradition speaks of human beings as potentially divine. Not because we can escape or overcome cosmic law, but because consciousness itself represents the universe becoming aware of and creative within its own processes. Through human understanding and choice, the cosmos gains the capacity to transform itself consciously rather than evolving only through blind mechanism. We live inside the weave, yet with awareness, we become co-weavers in the cosmic tapestry. This recognition transforms the entire question of fate and freedom from a philosophical problem into a practical invitation. Instead of asking whether we are free or determined, we can ask, how can we participate most creatively in the cosmic process of which we form a part? Instead of trying to escape necessity, we can inquire, how can we make necessity itself the vehicle for wisdom and compassion? The answers to these questions will be unique for each individual, because each person represents a unique intersection of cosmic forces and conscious potential. But certain general principles can guide our exploration. We can cultivate the capacity to recognize cosmic law in operation rather than experiencing it as arbitrary fate. We can develop skill in working with these laws to create beneficial outcomes rather than merely enduring whatever happens. We can learn to align our individual creativity with universal creativity so that our personal fulfillment contributes to, rather than conflicts with, the common good. Perhaps most importantly, we can learn to perceive the entire cosmic process, including our own lives, as fundamentally meaningful rather than arbitrary. The Hermetic understanding suggests that consciousness and cosmos evolve together toward greater complexity, beauty, and wisdom. Every individual journey participates in this larger movement, and every authentic choice contributes to its fulfillment. From this perspective, what we call fate is not a prison, but a pattern awaiting the thread of our will. The pattern provides structure and meaning, while our conscious participation provides creativity and direction. Together, they weave a tapestry that expresses both cosmic necessity and human freedom in forms that neither could create alone. Fate is not a prison, but a pattern awaiting the thread of our will.